I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Drone Camps channel. I have something new here today to show you guys and review. This is the Tombee 150, and it looks amazingly like the Immersion RC Vortex 150. I had one, I crashed it in the ocean, but now I have one from Tombee, and this looks very similar. Now inside the box I didn't get a battery, and I got the plug-and-fly version, so I put my own receiver back here, and that's an S-Bus receiver, so it does take PPM or S-Bus. And one other thing that you need to know about this quad is it does come with CleanFlight 1.3 on there, so it's not Betaflight on here. You could reflash it to Betaflight if you want to, but I just left it set up with CleanFlight 1.3, set up my switches, and now I'm out here for a flight test. So I'm just gonna fly it stock the way it came for you guys and show you what the flight characteristics are gonna be like. And if you're gonna put a receiver on this, if you have Frsky, Spektrum, or Futaba, I would recommend some type of micro receiver. Like a full range XM Plus is great. It's going to give you plenty of reception and plenty of range with that receiver. Plenty of room out here for the baseball field. So let's go ahead and set this one down and plug in the battery. I'm going to use a 4S 850 milliamp, and we'll test that line of sight, and then we'll do some FPV, guys. Here we go. And I'm going to come up off the ground, and this is my maiden flight with it. I am flying an acro right now, but wow, it seems to be pretty stable. Reminds me a lot of that other 150 that I flew. And Immersion RC had their VTX set to 25 milliwatt for default. So when I flew it out over the water, I flew just half a football field and lost video reception, and it went in the ocean. Still a little punch out. Whoa, I need to turn those rates way up. Did you see how big the flip was there? It didn't want to go over. I would have to go really, really high right now to do a full roll. So the rates on this one are dialed way back, which means if you try to flip it, it's going to do a huge circle like that. See that? That's not good. So if you want to do flips and rolls, make sure you extend those rates up to about, I'd bring them up to 75 or so, and you'll do a nice clean flip. Otherwise, you're going to flip straight into the ground on these stock rates. So one thing to look out for this Tombee 150, turn the rates way up and you'll be fine. Nice little LEDs in the back, but let's go ahead and set this down and do some FPV with it, and I'll show you guys how it does in the air with some FPV action. Here we go, guys. Alright guys, welcome back to the studio. Let's go ahead and take a little closer look at this little 3-inch racer. Now it is pretty minimal on the specs. It's only 15 amp ESCs, but you can run 4S battery on here. So you can run this quad 3 or 4S. If you're new to FPV, I would suggest starting out with a 3S battery. Just make it like a cruiser, go slow, learn your sticks and orientation for flying FPV, move up to the goggles, and then after you're comfortable with flying this quad, go ahead and put a 4S battery on there. And the one I'm going to recommend is a 4S 850 milliamp. If you go anywhere above 1000 milliamp on this, it's going to start to feel a little bit heavy in the punch outs because it doesn't have the biggest motor system on here. This power system is running 1806 motors, so they're not the biggest motors in the world for this size of racer. And every which way I look at this quad from front to back, it looks exactly like the Vortex 150 from Immersion RC, but on the inside, this is their own flight controller and PDB setup, so everything inside here and the internal setup of this quad is completely different than the Vortex 150. It is running SP Racing F3 firmware on here, and it's running CleanFlight 1.3 on here, so you're going to have to go back a version on the software. So go to github.com, download the version of CleanFlight called 1.3, and you can open up this quad, and if you want to do a future update on it, you can also update it from there because you'll be able to flash the firmware. But to set up your switches on your radio and all that and get this quad flying right, you're definitely going to need to download 1.3. And I'll try to find that link for you guys and put it down there below to help you out. Now, flight-wise, the characteristic of this quad is really smooth, it's predictable, and it's not a hot rod. It wasn't something that I put up in the air and I was kind of over-controlling it with the sticks. Sometimes when I have too much power, I end up flying into a tree branch because I get a little bit excited about how much power a quad has. But this quad is really comfortable on the sticks. It doesn't have a ton of punch-out. When you go full throttle, it just doesn't blast out of the air like some of them do. So I can easily recommend this one to new guys or beginners just getting into FPV. It's actually quite durable too with this sandwich construction they have here. They've got a 3mm top plate and a 2mm bottom plate sandwiching in the PDB. You see that drum tech part? That's actually the PDB that runs from front to back on this quad. And you've got plastic bumpers that are vented covering up the ESCs. Those are the 15 amp ESCs out on the arms. So those are individual ESCs, which is really good to the hobby because if you have one go bad, you just have to replace one ESC, not all four. Now the motors on here, I was saying they're quite smaller than something like you'd have on a larger quad, like a 5-inch quad. You'd normally have 2205 or bigger. These are Tombee 1806s on here, and they're 3100 kV. They're also clockwise and counterclockwise. And included with this quad, it doesn't come with self-locking nuts. I would go get some self-locking nuts. You're going to need clockwise and counterclockwise self-locking nuts, so you can look those up on Amazon. But you do not want to use these bullet style nuts. These are the most terrible things in the hobby. They spin off and they fly off the motor sometimes. If you have one fly off, the prop's going to come off too, and it's going to cause an immediate crash. So I haven't been flying these since about 2014. They are absolutely outdated. So get rid of those bullet nuts and get yourself some self-locking style nuts. Those are just going to be a lot better. They have a little bit of plastic core inside them, and when you tighten them down, you're really going to get them nice and tight. They're not going to come off. Also, by the way, since these are such small motors, they're almost impossible to hold with your hand. So you're going to need some kind of motor wrench to hold this motor tight while you tighten down the top nut there. And I'll try to put a link down below for a motor wrench. It's just simply a wrench with a little plastic core that goes around the motor, and you can hold the motor tight while you tighten up this top nut. Now the camera on the Tombee 150 is actually pretty decent. It has a housing around the whole thing. It has plenty of tilt here. You can almost get a pro type of tilt here. It's about 30 degrees and on down to horizontal if you're just starting out. It has 2 bolts on each side of it. You need to tighten these up when you first get it because the camera does come kind of loose. And the higher up you tilt this camera, the faster you're going to fly. But the camera is 800 TVL, and they do say it's HD, but it's a pretty decent quality. It has pretty high colors. I think it's probably going to do the best on the sunny days. You might be able to go in there and you might be able to change around the brightness and contrast and the color settings. If you can, that would be a lot better for guys that fly in sort of overcast conditions. But I feel like this camera is better than the Immersion RC cameras that they put on theirs, because they seem to not handle the darks very well at all. Let's just go ahead and look at the left side of the quad here where the battery strap comes around. Just below that, you can see 2 things here. You've got a USB port for accessing CleanFlight, and over here on this side, this is going to be your bind button for binding up certain types of receivers. Also, I would probably suggest taking this entire top off, putting your own receiver underneath here and bind it up before you close it back up. And then you can run your antennas out the top and the back and use just little miniature zip ties with a little bit of heat shrink over them, and those will stand them up out of the way and clear the props. And also tucked in behind the camera, we have that XT30 connector for your battery. It's just kind of hiding back behind the camera right there. Now we're looking at this little bind button again, and it does say in the manual that there is an onboard receiver on here. It's a Spektrum RXC6 receiver, and it's compatible with Gavin style radios, and it's also compatible with PPM and S-Bus Spektrum receivers. So that might mean that this quad can bind up to any Spektrum style radio. So you're looking at the back of the quad here, and they include a right-hand circular polarized antenna, which is great because on 5.8, these are really nice antennas. It'll give you a nice clear reception back to your goggles, and it just screws in just like this. And we're just going to hand tighten that tight, and then you can bend up the back so it's sitting upright while you're flying. So when you're at this angle, you get the best reception back to your goggles. And the video transmitter is actually inside here. You can see it, and you can get to it with some type of device in here. You can push that button. If you hold down the button for 5 seconds, you're going to change the bands. If you short press it, you're going to change the channels. And you've got up to 48 channels on this quad, so plenty of room to move around. Now, they didn't skip a beeper on this quad either, which I really like, and I was able to set up and configure the beeper on my quad. So I just set that to my auxiliary 3 channel. When I flip the switch, the beeper goes off. So if it goes down in the grass like it did on me, it was face down in the grass, and I was able to flip the switch and just walk right up to it. And by the way, the ESCs on this do support one shot, and they do have a burst up to 30 amps, so you can run a 4S battery on there, no problem at all. And I don't know if you guys remember it, but I did mention that I crashed my Vortex 150 in the ocean, which was a terrible thing, but Vortex 150 came with a switchable video transmitter, and it came defaulted to 25 milliwatt when I got the first one. It might have been a prototype, but when I flew out over the ocean to make an epic video, of course, I lost video and I couldn't find my way back to come back, and I ended up landing in the water, which was completely terrible, a terrible loss. But this one does not have 25 milliwatt on it. 25 milliwatt is not that great. This one does come with 200 milliwatt, and you're going to get a couple football fields or more with 200 milliwatt. That's what most FPV racing guys fly with. Let's go ahead and set this one on the scale and give it away. It is 212 grams, not bad, exactly 212 grams. And with the 4S 850, you're going to look at a total takeoff weight of 310 grams. Now, if you want to get it under that 250 gram weight, you could always go down to like a 3S 650 milliamp. That's going to get you under the registration mark. But at 212 grams total dry weight right here, that's not bad. That's a pretty lightweight 3-inch. And this quad really seems to have everything. It does also have a built-in OSD on here, letting you know what your battery telemetry is so you don't overrun your batteries. If you start to have a low voltage situation, it's also going to let you know. You probably saw that in my flight demo. When I was getting low on the battery, when I would punch it, it would go super low voltage, and it tells you on the screen that you're having a low voltage, so you know when to come back in and land so you don't swell your batteries up. Now, inside the box, you also do get 2 pairs of props in here, and these are kind of like stock beginner props. I might fly these until you break all of these, but I would suggest using the RotorX 3-inch props. You can go on RotorX's website, just Google them and find these props. These are the 3040 props. These are super sweet on here, and they're really nice and smooth. And I was also pleasantly surprised that the manual on this one is really not that bad. It's in English and Chinese. It has all the information on the specs in here about your model. It talks about all the different parts that come in the box, what the cables are. It does come with a PPM cable and an S-Bus cable and a Spektrum cable inside the box. That's kind of nice they do that. It also talks about the 2 different style Gavin radios that they have available for this one. There's a Gavin 6A and a Gavin 6C. And they even show a 4S 850 milliamp battery in here. So that's what I was suggesting to you guys, and that's what the manual also suggests. And what's also cool is they also have all the components labeled on the aircraft. So go over this and look at what everything is on here so you're pretty familiar with this quad when you start to fly it. It also has some information on that Gavin transmitter. And they say back here in the specs, you're going to get about 7 minutes flight time. I think that's more realistic, like maybe like 4 minutes maximum on an 850 4S battery if you have a full charge. But it's a pretty sweet manual, and I think everything is pretty well written in here. It doesn't seem like it's kind of broken English, and it's pretty readable. And last but not least in the box, this is your Spektrum cable and your USB cable for connecting it to Clean Flight. But some final thoughts and a rating. Let's go ahead and give this one a star rating. I'm going to say that this one's probably about a 4 out of 5. I'm not going to go any higher than 4 because I think the bullet nuts are a little bit 2015, and the fact that it did have Clean Flight 1.3 on here just seems like they have sort of an old flight controller. Now, it's not bad because it is an F3, so that's not a big deal. I'm always a fan of SP Racing firmware, and it flies great, and it's really stable and really predictable and easy to fly. If you have Clean Flight 1.3, that's not a big deal. Just install the drivers, set up your switches, and you can pretty much go out and start flying this quad. And that's probably the biggest attraction to new guys, is that this is not a really hard quad to set up and get outside and flying. And that's what it should be like. It should be easy for the new guys to go out and just get in the air and start flying without a lot of hassle. But other than that, it has everything that I like, and especially for beginners. It's not overpowered. It's not going to punch out through the ceiling. It has a decent camera on here. It has OSD. It has a nice sandwiched body, though, so it's not going to have a lot of damage to it. You're probably not going to break an arm off. If you do, you probably hit something going extremely, extremely fast. And the video transmission back to my goggles was really, really good, as you guys could see. So I can pretty much recommend this to anybody that's looking for something that's not going to have a ton of punch out and a ton of power, something that you're going to be afraid of to fly. So it's a very lightweight quad. It's very smooth flying. The PIDs on here actually tune pretty well, so it's going to fly without a lot of vibration right out of the box, and that's what I'm really looking for when I look for a beginner quad. And the quality on this one seems to be a lot better than the older 250 version, like I was telling you guys before. So you can check this one out in the link below, and also some batteries that I'm going to recommend for it. And I'll also try to put a little better antenna on there, so you can use a different style antenna if you want to upgrade this antenna. But that's about it for this review, guys. I had a lot of fun with the Tombee 150. Not a bad quad in my opinion. Mine turned out to be really a good and fun and relaxing experience. So I'm Justin Davis, guys. Appreciate you hanging out with me and flying with me. This has been the Tombee 150 FPV Racer. I'll see you on the next one.